There's lots of seats here. So our keynote speaker, Dr. Iona Wynter Parks. How many of you have had Dr. Wynter Parks in class? Now, how many of you had to be here because Dr. Wynter Parks told you you had to be here?
That's right.
I was going to say, you're not
I'm sure. I mean, it's the equivalent of forcing my mom to come.
So, many of you know Dr. Wynter Parks, others of you maybe not so well, so I'll just briefly tell you a little bit about her. She grew up in Jamaica, and to me, she represents the essence of what we mean when we talk about liberal arts and liberal arts thinking, mind and body, being well-rounded. These are all things that I think Dr. Wynter Parks exemplifies. She began her studies at the University of West Indies. She then studied at Dalhousie University of Halifax, earned her BA at Laval in Quebec City, her MA at Georgia State, her PhD just last year at the University of Georgia. That's an amazing array of colleges. See how smart she is because she keeps going to these colleges.
Or I got kicked out.
I cannot tell you why she left from one to the other. She has taught at Oglethorpe since 2013 in both French and in the core, and has included in many of her courses service learning options through her Books for Africa project. She specializes in French language and literature, Francophone identity, narrative technique, all things I think she brings to all of her classes regardless of the prefix. Many of you probably do know, but it bears repeating, that she competed in the 2000 Olympics in Sydney as a triathlete, and then subsequently became a world-class cyclist, and has led numerous trips in the summer in France, following the Tour de France with amateur riders who want to act like the big boys. But for us, well, that's very cool. It's most important that she's an excellent teacher, and she is. She has a special fascination with animals, in addition to humans, and has some interesting thoughts on their nature. And this morning she's going to talk to us on performing heresy to our systems of knowing, moving the measure of man to the measure of the world. So please help me welcome Dr. Wynter Parks.
Warms my heart. So I'm wearing my jester dress because we're going to be talking about jesters a lot. We'll be hearing jester, jester, jester ad nauseum. I'm starting to laugh because I was having a joke with Dr. Palder. Just the over-preparation for coming here. I was driving. I was like, how am I, playing through my? How am I gonna? I'm gonna talk about jesters. Maybe I'll do gestures, gesticulation, and then I started cackling. Picture the crazy lady at the stoplight crying. Because I was imagining I'd be mid-moment saying jester, jester, this fantastic introduction, and then I'd see the faces of you all and be like, okay, how many of you think I'm drunk? Or that I'm under duress? So let's just start. I say titles are important. Those of you who are in my core, you know I'm always like, you meant something good. I know you're looking at my title and going, this is... But I need these elements, let me tell you. Performing heresy. You'll see why I need performing and why heresy. Heresy goes with the theme of jester. When I say jester, you say what? What comes up? Thank you. Medieval. Jester. When I say jester, you say, this is my favorite game. Court. Court? Court. Okay.
Ooh,
I'm not getting the answer to that.
Joker.
Oh.
Joker, yes. Getting closer, warmer, warmer.
Trickster.
Trickster, maybe. Yes, fool, maybe. Come on. This is your Oglethorpe education?
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, yes.
A foil.
Boy. Think of the big brain over time. Okay, we're getting closer. So yes, think of Jester as somebody that's going to be performing heresy or labeled as a heretic, because performing heresy to systems of knowing came up in my class today. What do you mean by ways of knowing, systems of knowing? Anything that you think is the untouchable, because it's so obvious. So the jester is exposing, poking, shaking at the unshakable. This expected, right? Then my subtitle, moving from the measure of man in quote, is referring to that Renaissance humanism man that came out of European Renaissance. And then the quote, measure of the world, that's Césaire, saying that's the destination that will take into account, it's not getting rid of humanism, but it's a humanism that will be wider. That's the destination. That's where Sylvia Wynter wants to go. She's drawing on Frantz Fanon and Michel Foucault. That's just two that I'm going to say here, but understand that there are ecosystems and that there are conversations, and she's drawing, as well as everybody here in this room, draw on many, many more conversations across many, many more eras, contexts, ideas. I asked for some gestures. Can you guys see this? This is a converted Keynote to PowerPoint. It looks ghetto. Does not look as cool as what I had. You know, I wanted Keynote for a reason because of the design. So I asked, especially in science, because I have to work so hard to go across the aisle to understand some of the questions and the ways that some of these disciplines ask their questions. And I'm really curious. I wanted to know, who are the jesters for your disciplines? I've asked for economics, I've asked for, I didn't so much ask for humanities because I have more of a sense, and I'm hoping 15 minutes or so we can all interact with this and the idea of jesters towards the end of the presentation. So here are my heretics for this talk. Our main one is Sylvia Wynter, and she's, as I said before, going to be interacting with Fanon and Foucault, two people who are going to just break down without, I'm trying not to lose the complexity of their thing, but we only have so much time. Her notion of jester is followed off of a Polish philosopher, Bolesnik Kolakowski. He published a 1959 essay called The Priest and the Jester. The idea is, since this is Sylvia Wynter's inspiration for the jester, the idea is, for him, the jester that exposes, that shakes the unshakable, but the priest, the figure of the priest, is the one that holds up, continues the expected, the norms, continuation of the tradition. Understand that there, per Kolakowski, there are always figures of priest and jester in every given society configuration, right? Wynter, her project that I'll be explaining to you today, she wants to reconfigure the human, the figure of the human, the model of the human that came out of that European Renaissance. Why? Because it's white. Why? Because it's heteronormative. Why? Because it's male and it excludes anybody, any group that doesn't fit into that, right? So she does so off of Fanon, based on a principle that he did, he himself performing a jester move to psychology at the time in the 50s. Foucault she engages with because he's doing an archaeological thing in that work of how do we know what we know across the time, and what are the conditions? What are the conditions that make it right so that whatever is positive gets put into play? And that's what he's interested in. So, Wynter. My name's Wynter. Are you curious about what the connection is? Yes. When people ask me, are you related to her because she's a Jamaican scholar? She's still alive. I have conversations with her. I'm hoping to squeeze out every little last bit of intellectualism before she dies. She is a Jamaican scholar. She grew up in Jamaica, as I did, but she was in a Jamaica that was under the visible, obvious, overt colonialism time. And I grew up in Jamaica after independence. So different points of intersection. We are, in theory, related. I don't discount it. If people say you're related, I'm like, maybe. I want that intellectual sheen to shine on. But I did go to school with her nephew and niece from her older brother, now deceased, who was a prominent figure in Jamaica. And it was his second marriage, so that's why they were in school with me at the same time. He maintained through Lincoln, the son, her nephew, that we were related. We were of the Winters. There's lots of Winters. I spell the name this way in Jamaica. That we were related, and teenager, I didn't question it. His word was golden. He was a prominent figure. It's fine by me. I didn't know anything about her. She was an academic. What teenager is really impressed with an academic? It's not like I thought I was going to be an academic at that time. So I didn't engage with her until I'm reading. Now I'm an academic. I'm engaged in Francophone theory, post-colonial theory, all the Caribbean, especially the Martinican ones. And I'm coming across this Sylvia Wynter, who's Jamaican, and blowing my mind. So I get in touch. But that's the connection.
How old is she?
She's 90. And she's having a sort of renaissance moment herself, in the sense of people in the last 5 years, King's College in London, lots of colloquia, they are publishing papers and they're engaging with her because of the climate that we're in. And she's known for over 6 decades of engaging across interdisciplinary lines. I mean, I have index cards that I couldn't possibly memorize. I say to memorize for the presentations, right, core? But this is just, it was too hard. Neurobiologist, so I'll just, if I have to refer to them, what she got out of them, or how the brain works, or, they're on index cards. So, but she engages and has gone there and across all of those disciplinary lines because she wants to get the full picture. She wants to take down that image of the human as it's configured coming out of European Renaissance. She wants to look at the ideas. She wants to look at the categorization, the categorized existence. And to do that and get the full picture, she imagine 6 decades and counting of going to all these different disciplines. So man as in, this is the figure of coming out of the European Renaissance. And then humanness and knowledge. Why Foucault? I chose him, even though she's English with many more, because of this archaeological way that, in this order of the history of the ideas, that how do we know what we know, what are the conditions that are right for that, but also because of education. Education is important in my investigation, and it's important for Wynter. So he also iterates in this work that the figure of man came out of this, in this archaeology and she takes that up and works with Fanon to reconfigure or refigure this figure of the human. For Foucault, the spirit of his investigation, the objective, slow, okay, that's the conversion. Yeah, don't wait for that, okay. The spirit of investigation is objective in that archive is the accumulated existence of the knowledge, right, of discourse. And so she is interested in the register of the discourse. Register of discourse, because discourse is a representation. Discourse is how something gets represented, and then Foucault's engaging with what are the conditions that make it right for it to be accepted as such. So, and what she wants to do is she wants to restore our conceptualization of human life. So that's messed up. Let's just go this way. He's very interested in marginalized groups and the potential inside of those marginalized groups, the knowledges that have been disqualified. And there I am interested too, because the liberating effects, potentialities of, if you get the fuller picture and you realize that there are other ways of knowing, how can you be so sure that your system of knowing and the conditions of what we take for granted is the way and the only way? This is why it's important to do. Everything that we're experiencing now, she feels, comes out of this framework, and this is why she has to go to the level of the figure of the human. Everything from environmental disasters, from migrants being held at the gates of the very rich countries, everything stems from this configuration of man. What she gets from Fanon. In this work, for those of you who don't know it, Fanon stages a psychiatric evaluation or an intervention on knowledge. But he does it where he'll take up, using the tenets of psychiatry, he'll do one for every chapter, but he starts this off with an anecdote, which is very effective. I love stories, as everybody knows from Core. But picture, this is the experience where he's a Martinican scholar, Martinican intellectual, under France, or French rule, now a Department of France, goes to France, as you do, to continue his studies. And Caribbean blacks and Martinique did not think of themselves as black in the sense of the African, black in the sense of the Negro. Yes, they had dark skin, but that doesn't mean that they're black. In other words, because they were formed in the French system of values, their outlook was white, especially the bourgeois middle class, and he was from a middle class family. In fact, his family was from the rare 4% of blacks on Martinique that had means. So he is fully invested in this view. This is his worldview. He arrives in France. We who read this account, we are placed in the anecdote of his experience. Picture, if you will, he's formed, he's educated, he has all the qualifications per the value system of this education. And he overhears, and he speaks French, not French, that's how they call it. He speaks French, meaning French from France. With the accent, everything. No variation, no jive, no blanc, right? He's overhearing a little kid to his mom. Mom, I see a Negro. I see a Negro. Picture Fanon. Me? And I'm scared, I'm frightened. Negro, frightened, and that's the encounter. And this is the encounter, I say encounter with a capital E. This is an encounter that every person of color has had at some point. You want to know what my encounter? Nowhere near as dramatic. My encounter is coming to the United States. And talk about on the level of theory and then on the level of practice. On the level of theory, the form, filling out the boxes that exists here. Why do I have to check white, Caucasian, black, then there's this weird, Hispanic, or white, not Hispanic. What is that? And I can't check one or the other. Now I sound like Marla Maples or whatever her name is that married Prince Harry. check one or the other. I'm both. And I'm much more than that, right? So there's the form, which is weird. All right, we can laugh that off. But in practice, I open my mouth. People are looking at me. I have this question that has dogged me ever since I've been in the United States. What are you? What are you? A what? It's almost like an obsession. That's my encounter. I mean, I laughed at it, right? We are way far along then. This was mind-shattering for Fanon. Because he was not, Negroes are in Africa. Negroes in the behavioral sense, savage, barbarous. Barbarous, is that a word? Yeah. Barbaric. Everything that has been told to him that he has ingested and believes in. It seems incredible to us to think, well, how could somebody in the Caribbean be like, what? But if there is, I grew up much later than Fanon, and I felt there was a difference between us in the Caribbean and people in Africa. It is a thing when you are acculturated and there's this worldview, and it has to do with education. So that is the start of his trajectory. He goes on, gets trained, medical doctor, psychiatrist, looking for work. He ends up running a facility in Algeria, which changes his life. Not only do we get what we get theory-wise from him out of this experience from his practice, treating patients, and those patients were Algerians, Muslims under colonial French rule, getting ready for the liberation, getting ready to fight for their independence. Not the ones that are in the psychiatric ward, but what he is finding in Algeria is, yeah, these tools, these psychiatric tools, they're not working. They're not working, and they're not working with the Muslim. And he comes up with this push against, at the time, Freud in psychoanalysis. And he's saying it's not, he's basically advocating for, you have to take into account the sociocultural experience, which seems pretty logical to us now. But you have to take that into account. You can't just have the theory of, a universal theory of diagnosing people coming out of Europe, which is a one-size-fits-all. That doesn't make any sense. So this is what he posits. That makes sense to us now, but this is 1952 when we are getting this, right? So this thing here is what Wynter takes up, sociogeny, where he says, beside phylogeny and ontogeny stands sociogeny. In other words, the cultural, especially a colonial oppressive system that tells you that you are not, just as Fanon had that disconnect, this double consciousness, much like what you learn about Du Bois when he's saying, I can't be American and be a Negro, can't, right? He's having that and that split, where a colonial system has this Manichean, dualistic poles of absolutes, and you're the one that's being constituted as in the condition of lack, right? So Wynter takes that. I hope I haven't bastardized the complexity of all of these operations. I want to get to how Wynter starts attacking or working on refiguring the figure of the human. She goes with Fanon's sociogenic idea, notion, calls it the sociogenic principle, and she's maintaining that humans are made up of, we are both biological as well as storytelling. Waiting. And what that does is it dislodges the biocentric system of knowledge in that we're not just an we're not just an organism that just evolves independent of what's happening socially. And we, in as much as we are constituting our own storytelling, interacting, we are co-develop. We are co-constituted this way, so we are biologic as well as narrative. This is what she is disrupting, and this is her gesturing, this is her heresy by pushing against a system of knowledge that's biocentric. Remember that the Renaissance had its own overturning of the secular, of the theological, by becoming more secular. Not completely getting rid of the church. That was still in existence and still going along with, but man one went from church to a scientific man. A man that could create his own path, blaze his own path. And this is happening at the same time that all the explorations are happening in the New World. So while this knowledge is happening, everything's overturning in Europe, all the age of discovery, it's also happening where European man is exploring and encountering these indigenous peoples in the parts of the world, but let's focus on the Americas. And counter to man, the figure of the human, the other is all these other people. All these other peoples that are being encountered, so it works. This is all working in tandem. These are all facets, their new framework. Okay. She maintains. Can you see that picture in the back? Galileo's Dialogo. She maintains that the sociogenic principle that Fanon came up with is on the level of a Copernican revolution. So I wanted to put Galileo's contribution following off of Copernicus because I want to emphasize all of the environment in the sense of ecological and that original etymology, building on, and how we all know that Galileo was labeled a heretic for that. So understand that when Homo economicus is being replaced, posited that we're really Homo navans. She's following off of furthering Fanon, but she's saying that what he's contributed is essentially on the level of a Copernican contribution. Can you see that? Why do we care about this? Because we are in all kinds of knowledge environments. Environment in the largest sense of the word, socio-environments. The environments of how you're learning, we are learning. And so it matters. It matters to, I put that, how do you pronounce it, Dr. Chandler? I always bastardize in Spanish, but the kind of, can you see this? The Pope must have been drunk. That's the title of Wynter's. Yeah. I've been reading so much of her, that's probably why my title is so long. But she has like paragraphs for titles. The Pope must have been drunk, culture is at I didn't even put the whole title down, but it was tackling that Spanish, the Spanish requirement of 1513, where the Pope just gave, there was this arrangement, the Pope was going to give, if they didn't convert, new peoples didn't convert, that they would be read this thing, resort to Catholicism, etc., and she regularly writes essays that go from the point of view of the indigenous people, that they must have been thinking as they're being read in Spanish, as Pope is drunk, right? So think of it in terms of our environments, our knowledge environments. Are we in a curriculum of man, as in that man figure that she's trying to debunk? Is that pervasive in all our universities, the westernized universities? And then what are the effects of that? There's a quote there where she says, you know, you must imagine the student just reading Locke and Hume and all these, they must be blown away, but at the same time going, but where do I fit in it if I am not in this image of man, right? So it does matter. We need to know what it is. We need to have that fuller view. We need to have it. We need to have differences in our curriculums. We need to have that fuller view so that we, and you guys are the generation that are going to save us, right? So I want you to have that full perspective. I ask you, what do you want out of your education? Just the credential? I already know the answer to that. Or do you want to go in other dimensions, have dimensions to your education? Have ecosystems. In a perfect world, our core will work like that. Having the ecosystems and the connections. Annalise, are you here? Annalise is a student of mine that's in French 302, as I've seen some of the French 302 students, but she's also in Dr. Mar's core right now. And she was like, I'm reading Fanon in French 302 in French, I'm reading Paul Noir, Masculin, and I'm reading The Wretched, which really should be The Damned. But The Wretched of the, and so she's making all of these, and that wasn't planned. I mean, maybe, I don't know, Dr. Mar and I talk, and but it's all there, and we'll get a fuller view. Also, you'll be more nimble, more agile, able to, I don't know, to go with the flow. This world is changing. The societies that don't change are the ones that are stuck in the old paradigms. What does this mean for me? Why am I interested in this? Okay, so we're in the Anthropocene, yes? Have you heard of the Anthropocene? Some are calling it the Capitalistine. I'll wait for this to load, where you can get to this quote of this one scientist that is, she's in environmental criticism, she's in eco-criticism, and she's, and she explains that we need to, she's been taught, we need stories. We need stories. Don't say that literature doesn't count. We need stories and theories that are just big enough to gather up the complexities and keep the edges open and greedy for surprising new and old connections. To keep the edges open. That's a Césaire thing. That's a Fanon thing. That is be willing to encounter. And it's also taking up the Fanon dialectic thing that it's not fixed poles. The liberation actually is, it lies in the dynamic. Just because you're white doesn't mean you're going to be fixed racist, right? Your dynamic with me, that can change things, and out of that dynamic is what? Out of that relationship is where the liberation can be. That's where there can be a possibility of shift, albeit probably. I'm not saying kumbaya, utopia. I'm saying there are possibilities there. This is what that takes up. So eco-criticism looks across that. It's very important to have these interdisciplinary engagements, to be able to make those shifts and see what we can find in those interactions, and the reality of those interdependencies that we have. I try to do it here in Oglethorpe. Those of you who and you were one of the first in iteration. We've only done 3 of them. This is the 3rd one. But why is there environmental degradation in these countries? What is it related to? It's not just that these people don't know what they're doing, they can't handle it, right? How is it related to social injustice? What do we mean by structural inequities? Yes, you can think that in a 2nd-year French class. Yes, you can do that in giving of books. Why do these kids who are part of a language, French is one of their official languages in these countries, Benin and Haiti in this case, why don't they have literature books in one of the official languages? They're starving for stories. We are contributing, we've done 37 so far, and our students are making these connections. You students are the ones, this is normal for you. You are the ones that have this nimble facility. It's normal for you to be across these environments, but this is where it's at. This is the future. PowerPoint is really just not as advanced as Keynote. So this is some of the literature that I've taught. Mabankou, I've taught in narratives, in translation, and then in the French class, the 300 level in the original language. And then these are people that I publish on, but it's regenerative. Thinking, I want you to retain that. Poking, asking those questions, that can cause that shift. She signs off, yours in the intellectual struggle. I think that tells a lot. 2 things I really, really want you to retain from it is, number 1, because it's the struggle, meaning being a jester or trying to find the full view, or trying to find the truth, or trying to have a broader, inclusive, have everybody have their say. It's going to be a struggle, and it might be dangerous too, right? But also yours in the intellectual struggle, that it's a collaborative thing, building on each other, all the ecosystems, across eras, across disciplines, contexts. Collaborative. I'll leave you with that. I'm not advocating like the beer thing, but it is in that tone. Stay curious, my friends. That's the thing in my head. So I'd like to ask, can this go back? I'd like to have a conversation with the remaining few minutes that we have about any of the stuff that I brought up. Any of the gestures even that you have seen from some of the professors. Some of you are in those disciplines.
Okay.
I'll wait. Yep.
I just found it really relatable whenever you're talking about how people would say like, what are you? And stuff like that. And you're just like, I don't know, a person?
Yeah, it's a weird, but the fact that, what's interesting about that is that it's normal to ask that. That was an okay question to bust out there, right? So it's just showing you that framework. And it's not just letting me know that you think that I'm strange and that I'm, you know, it's the, or that you're different, or, right? It's that it's actually the fact that it's so normal where I am asking this question that it's normal for me to ask that. There was a hand at the back, and then I'll get you.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, let's do this. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Can social media be a form of this intermingling of intersectionality that's going on over here?
I think that's why you guys are so nimble. And it's why my brain hurts, because I mean everybody knows how I'm trying to be cool and keep up with the technology thing. I can't even keep you know. But I do think that it is the reason why things are going. It feels lightning fast for somebody like me. Probably you guys are like 2 seconds. Why is it taking so long, right? But I do think that like portable telephones, when they came, when cellular telephones came, they were very affordable. They became affordable, and I remember going to visit friends in Zambia. And it was dangerous to go along some roads, like when we're heading down to the Zambezi River and stuff, because you could get ambushed, because he was like, oh, here comes the Land Cruiser, 2 o'clock, you know. And so it could be used for good as well as evil. The good part about it was that landlines were not available and not for people who didn't have means. That was happening in Jamaica too. Only the rich had landlines, or the very affluent middle class. People who were poor are not going to have running water. They're not going to have telephones like landlines. So cell phone was a fantastic thing for that. It was very democratic, but it could also be deployed for Land Cruiser coming. Just get that right. So I see social media, the computers, the avatar, in that way that it can be used for, as we know how many Oglethorpe, how many times do we have, where's Citrix or where's the IT people like we're having, I don't know, whatever scam, right? But at the same time, it's great for galvanizing people, keeping people in office. How many people have resigned out of office because, oh, they can see me? And quick, right? Then people, so that I think is a great thing. Robert, and yeah, you had one.
Seeing this PowerPoint made me think of the class I'm currently in, Human Nature and Social Order, Core 202, and how we talk about like human nature and like how it constitutes the social order. Is like about like the ideal human being. Like I think it's in human nature to like see the majority, for the majority to agree with each other, and that probably constitutes for the inequalities and the injustice.
Yeah, and there are injustices on multiple levels. Here I was just talking about this, you know, Sylvia Wynter going after the figure of the human as being the icon, the iconograph or the avatar, or as the ideal human, speaking as if that is the framework. You can see what the ramifications for that. But even in environmental literature and eco-criticism, when rich nations say, yeah, you know, that's terrible for the environment, or you can't drive a big SUV because we used to do it many, you know, eons ago and everything, but now we're driving our Priuses. So y'all need to, and then people who are starting to, countries in Africa or in China, or where people are starting to have some wealth, they're like, well, I want to drive an SUV. I want to drive a big SUV like you used to be able to. And that's just a banal example. But telling people that they can't do this practice or that practice because it's not good for the environment, because America or France or any of these very well-established industrial countries, they're now coming around to that. It's also this inequality on a bigger level. Again, the richer countries telling the poorer countries, global south, what to do or how to live, or, right? It's on so many levels, it's mind-boggling. Yeah.
So if I'm remembering my Fanon correctly, Fanon doesn't just describe the problems of colonialism, he also kind of gives a prescription for how you fix it, which is you revolt violently.
Yeah. Well, he did get, no, you're right that he doesn't say that it's not a possibility.
I guess I'm wondering.
It's an option that's available. No, he got a bad rap. Now he's coming back into vogue a little bit, but he got a bad rap because that it was interpreted that, okay, so if you tell the Muslim patient, you know what? It's not you, individual. You are affected by this apparatus that's around you. That is what's making you sick, right? And if that person can comprehend that and go, oh, whoa, you know, feel better about it kind of thing, then it may stop there, or it may, what will that person do with that information?
Right.
That's where he was. So he wasn't discounting the fact that that might be the cathartic thing, right? So yeah, you're right. It's an option.
But I'm wondering, like, what is Wynter's prescription for the problem? Like, what should we do?
Her prescription is to continue working together so that we can broaden, so that we can move to a humanism that's a measure of the world, as in the world as it actually is, right? When Donna Haraway, that ecologist who's, she's in science, when she says the edges that are greedy for the encounters, that's whatever may come of it, right? And people are very uncomfortable with the idea of something that's just left out in the open, like we don't, what's the answer? The answer is be brave so that you will be ready and nimble to see what comes of it. What's going to come of an interaction with you? What happens if I put my fabulous literature brain to your fabulous math brain? What could happen? What are the possibilities, right? Does it have to be a determined thing? That's what we're trying to get away from. Hi.
So thought about your question there. So, you know, one of the first things we ask incoming students is to fill out a box. You may have to call it one box that says, what is your
There
major?
we go with those boxes again.
But like, so, what is your major?
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of wonder whether that question by itself
Is predetermining, or, and especially because as a Compass advisor, well, anybody who's been advised by me, we always laugh in the office. I'm like, what's your major? Because we know it's not going to stay the same. Come on. Very rare is a student where it's, and yes, we have those students, just as you have the variation in people, where you can have somebody that really knows what they're going to do, and they're going to go out and do it, and they've done it, and it's been like that since they were in grade school. Most of us, though. I'm just saying. Am I missing? Yeah.
Do you think that we can ever reconcile the human desire to define, identify, and belong with our current desire to want to sort of homogenize and like that globalization and togetherness and sense of belonging we also want?
I mean, I do think that it's human nature to want to belong, right? But then what's home?
And what are you belonging to?
Yeah, what are you belonging to? I mean, now we're belonging to ideas. The social media that was brought up, you know, like you might belong to a group that these are my values, and that group could be constituted as far-flung as somebody's over there, somebody's in Anecdote, somebody's in, right? And then it could be just as the job situation where we're not stuck with one, we don't have this relationship, a lifetime relationship with one employer. TikTok, bye Oglethorpe. Right? But we don't have this relationship with one employer anymore as our parents did or our grandparents did. We move on. Maybe home is where the project is, right? Maybe home is where the values of acceptance is, right? Who's open to all of these various dimensions of us, right?
Is there space in society for priests and gestures, or is the goal to move towards a society only of gestures?
I think logically there's, well, Kolakowski says there's both. There's always both. It makes sense that there would be both. And it makes sense that, you know, there's nothing wrong with a little tension, a little push and tug, and keep things in the middle, right? Not too far, not too far. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think what would be beautiful is if we could have those conversations and then ideally, again, kumbaya, yeah, and something comes out of it that is sort of the best at the time for the most of the people. How am I doing for time? One more question? Should I do a Dr. Nardo, singing alone? Dr. Lutz?
I wonder if part of the blame for our current situation also doesn't go back to what the 19th century did with what they inherited from the Enlightenment. Because I always imagine I'm always drawn to somebody like, if we take Blaise Pascal in the 17th century, a very fine scientist, a philosopher, a theologian, and he wouldn't know what we were talking about in terms of where is he placed, because he wasn't categorized and forced into these disciplines that we have today. And you can, much of what you've talked about today.
Yeah, Foucault's disciplining of the disciplines and likening it, I find it very interesting that he likens it to, he has another text that's very famous, Disciplining and Punish, where when he's likening it to the prison system, or that disciplining us in our disciplines is a way of surveillance, or that, I find that a provocative idea and one worth considering. Like, we need to bust out of our prisons, out of our silos, and go towards the richness of what we can get from somebody else's perspective, and somebody else's training, and somebody else's point of view, culturally, academically, and also academy lived experience. One of the things in service learning that I like is that my students are producing these storybooks that's going to an actual, real, tangible, concrete need, and at the same time they're continuing to work on their emerging skills of French. So it's like theory, and I mean, at a time too, it's nice that we're doing it at the second level. It's a time where you could get bored of foreign language and like, well, okay, all right, well, when do we get to literature, or when do we get to the, But I think that blurring the lines we need to bust out of jail. Thank you.